Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I'm so glad you've joined me tonight because I've got a fabulous story for you, because that's what we're all about on the Saroy channel, fabulous stories, and it doesn't get better than this. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, my husband was sitting in his habitual place, the comfortable upholstered chair, at the low wooden breakfast table, covered in a kaleidoscope of bright-coloured, thimble-sized Moroccan tiles, done in a mosaic of oranges, greens, blues, golds and reds, in our cheerful sunny yellow kitchen of the semi-detached home where we lived on a Sunday morning, enjoying his traditional Sunday breakfast that had never wavered, vacillated or changed, not once in the 15 long years of our marriage. Suffice to say, not even the fluctuating seasonal weather conditions could encourage or persuade my stubborn husband's discerning palate to welcome variety or change, as he was resolutely stubborn, rigidly stuck in his ways, like a dead fly caught up in the honey pot. He was so traditional. Every Sunday it was hot, steamy croissants served with rich clouds of butter and homemade strawberry jam, washed down with black coffee, with no cream or sugar. My husband liked his coffee very strong, claiming that the caffeine kick made his mind as sharp as a knife and his attention as alert as a police dog. On this beguiling June morning, the soft shafts of pretty morning light filtered through the kitchen, and our two Weimaraner dogs, Heathcliff and Parker, lay like cosy grey foot-warmers on either side of his slippered feet. Not that his feet actually needed warming on what would likely become a sweltering hot summer's day in Albuquerque. This was exactly where I'd expect to find my husband, sitting at this time of the morning, after he had dutifully walked the dogs. We lived in the mid-town neighbourhood of Albuquerque, New Mexico, with an urban-suburban mixed feel about it, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Not that I would describe myself as a quintessential city girl, not at all, but I thoroughly enjoyed my busy life here. The city is flanked with the Sandia Mountains to the east, West Meso to the west, and the Rio Grande and Bosque flowing from the north to south. My husband was a brilliant professor at the University of New Mexico at the time. He was a practical man who saw life as very much black and white. There was no in-between, no grey shadows in his personal paradigm that he possessed of the world. As he had no time for obscure, ambiguous, far-fetched claims or ideologies that had no basis on reality or foundation in the truth, the kind of nonsensical suggestions that might be forced to stretch your imagination like an elastic band. As such frivolous, facetious, puerile and ditzy indulgences were to him just clickbait on social media platforms, to draw in the intrigued like an insect caught up in the silken fibres of a spider web, tangled up in the muddled, warped confusion of exaggerations that ensnared and enticed so many. In my husband's practical world, 4 + 4 = 8. The sky was blue. The world was a predictable place where the sun rose every morning and sank in the evening like clockwork. Let's just say he loved the reliable, customary, prosaic routines of everyday life, and he lived regimentally and religiously by the clock. As for him, the sanctioned flowing sequences of life were as comfortable as the sheepskin slippers he wore on his feet when he read the Wall Street Journal on a Sunday morning, while eating his warm croissants smothered with butter and jam, washed down with strong filtered black coffee. My husband did not like surprises in any shape or form, as they would inevitably derail and disrupt the smooth, seamless flow of the rich tapestry of his life, as if the wrong colour of trespassing thread had inadvertently been incorporated into the fabric, like a hostile impostor or invasive intruder that didn't belong. I stood there for a moment, drying a coffee mug in my hand, with a tea towel, as I watched my husband with an affectionate smile on my face, as his devoted, unfailing love for his prescribed daily routines always amused me. I think my husband's methodical, instinctively habitual ways are what had attracted and drawn me to him all those years ago in the first place. I had found the security and safety I craved in him. He was my soft place to fall, so to speak. Growing up as a young girl, I was like a little fish being flung from one stream to another and another. It wasn't a comfortable place to be, as the constant yo-yoing changes of my life was chaotic, disruptive, uncertain, and very disorientating for one so young. My parents had travelled around so much that I'd never ever felt settled. No sooner had I put my feet safely on solid ground and was beginning to make brand new friends at a new school, my parents would up and leave all over again, like a pair of restless jackrabbits with ants in their pants that were never satisfied with their burrow, as the grass always smelt greener somewhere else. I was never sure why my parents had such wandering nomadic spirits. They were compelled to always be on the move all the time, like a pair of travelling gypsies. I often suspected we may have had Romany gypsy roots somewhere in our bloodline, when many gypsies arrived in large numbers to the Americas from Britain in 1850. Sometimes I think they were running away from themselves. It would seem they were easily bored and clandestinely hankering after an exciting adventure of some kind. I would say, "Mummy, Daddy, can't we please stay here? I don't want to move all over again. I'm making new friends at the school and I really love this place." My mother would say, "Honestly, Viola, what are you like, dear? This town is driving me absolutely nuts. I can't hack it a moment longer without pulling my hair out. Have you seen how parochial and small town the people are around here? It's ridiculous." My father would say, "Your mother's absolutely right, Viola. There is nothing here for us. We need to move on. This place is humdrum, very boring if you ask me. Nothing going on here at all. Dull as dirty bath water." If we moved to a big city, my mother would say, "Oh, I can't stand it here. I can't bear it a moment longer. Everywhere we go, there are people breathing down our necks. The traffic is making a god-awful noise every day, and there are hooting taxicabs everywhere and people getting into fights on the sidewalks. Why, I nearly had my bag snatched the other day by a very shady-looking character, I might add." Once again, my father would chorus his agreement with my mother. "Your mother's absolutely right, Viola," he would say. "This place is far too crowded for us. Too much noise here. We need to be able to breathe again. We need to go to a smaller town, a place with prepossessing views, I think." If there was anything predictable about both of my parents, it was their incessant desire to fly away, like migratory birds, always looking for the quintessential nesting place, but never really being able to lay down roots anywhere. Even now, all these years later, I'm still getting postcards from my parents from all over America. One minute they'll be living in a small town in Kentucky. The next minute they'll be living in Houston in Texas. Suffice to say, in recent years, they have adopted an RV, when they realised that a life on wheels would graciously accommodate their restless spirits, and it seems they have never actually looked back from this travelling lifestyle. I remember when I first got married to James, my mother and father pulled me to one side discreetly and said, "Do you really want to marry a university professor, sweetheart? Aren't you scared to death you'll get bored out of your skull?" For them, bored was a dirty, offensive and vulgar word in the English dictionary that should never be entertained under any circumstances. Little did they know that I hankered after a stable life. Being bored sounded very reassuring to me, as it magnanimously offered up to me a promising silver platter of foreseeable certainty and assurance, which were extravagantly gratifying to me. I had been starved of these virtues my entire life. I was crying out for the fresh, invigorating oxygen and fresh air of normal, begging for the mundane, longing for the fabulously ordinary, like a gift I was aching to receive at the bottom of my Christmas stocking. I found this priceless, precious treasure in the reliable, steadfast loyalty of my husband James. My husband was as stoutly dependable as a sunny, cloudless day that would not rain or vacillate and waver with unexpected cold spells. and meteoric downpours. James, my husband, is very easy on the eye. A handsome man, with a warm olive complexion, a full thick head of salt and pepper coloured hair that shows off his piercing blue eyes superbly. I'd say he's one of those men who looks a lot better as he ages, rather like an excellent fine wine. The silver fox look really does suit him. Many of the young girls at the university would heartily agree with that, as many harbour clandestine crushes on him. My husband's perfectly symmetrical features, along with his masculine square jawline, always guarantees that women give him a second glance. Let's just say it used to drive me stark raving mad when on Valentine's Day our postbox was heaving and groaning under a plethora of cards that had been sent to him from many students, obviously nurturing secret crushes on him. One year I counted over 51 Valentine cards for my husband, and the only forlorn, sorry Valentine card that I actually received was predictably from him. It did make me feel very overshadowed. I was almost tempted to buy a bunch of Valentine cards to send to myself so that I didn't feel so upstaged, but that would have been pitifully sad, pathetic even. But I'm not going to lie, the thought did actually cross my mind. It astonished me that my husband could have so many cards from admiring fans, but then he does ooze a plethora of charm. As Sophia Loren always used to say, looks are fleeting and are soon forgotten, but charm is memorable and it'll get you noticed. Many young people are drawn to his warmth and his unpretentious charisma. I think the most Valentine's cards I ever got in my life was possibly 3, and that was a very good Valentine's Day indeed. Every Sunday morning, my husband has day-old stubble on his chin. He never shaves over the weekend, but I quite like the ruggedly masculine look. He's one of those frustratingly annoying people who stayed exactly the same waist size since he was at high school, and no matter what he eats, he remains slim. I, on the other hand, only have to look at a pizza or a slice of chocolate cake, and let's just say I can feel my pants begin to tighten almost at once. Anyone else who knows what that's like, it's not a good feeling. Let's say to look at, I'm not anything special. I think I've got the quintessential girl next door kind of looks. Shoulder-length brown hair worn in a bob, hazel brown eyes with flecks of green, and a heart-shaped face. My husband thinks I'm drop-dead gorgeous. I suppose that's enough for me, at least he thinks that. But I do question his eyesight at times. This morning, like every other morning, my husband's routines are much the same. He rises out of bed at about 8 o'clock, takes our 2 Weimaraner dogs in his truck for a walk at a nearby park. He then stops by the local baker's and picks up half a dozen croissants and some newspapers. He loves to spend half the morning going through them. The Albuquerque Journal, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post I think he enjoys reading the most. I think he likes the feeling of the paper between his fingers, and is very old-school traditional in this regard, following faithfully in his father's footsteps, who like him was also a university professor. It seems that the apple does not fall far from the tree. My husband looks up at me from the paper quizzically. "What are you staring at, Viola? Why, I do believe you've been standing there for over 2 minutes, gawking at me. As if I'm an unusual specimen in the zoo that you've never seen before. Either that, or have I got chewing gum in my hair or something?" "None of the above. Sorry, James. I was miles away." "Look at this," he says, lifting up the paper. "I'm a Pisces star sign, am I not?" I look at my husband in surprise. As for him, talking about something as nonsensical as an astrological star sign of the zodiac was as foreign as hearing a goldfish showing an interest in the green grass, the flowering meadows, and the cows grazing in the field. "Yes, you're a Pisces, that's right. But since when, James, have you been interested in star signs? I didn't think you believed in stuff like that." "I don't. How can people believe any of this hocus-pocus stuff and nonsense? Really," he says, folding his paper so it crinkles in his hands. "We live in such a gullible society these days that can't think for themselves. Look at my star sign today, for example. I'll read it to you," he says, lifting up the paper closely to his glasses. "This is a week of unexpected surprises for you. A small thing could unravel your plans this week.
and turn everything upside down, creating upheaval and chaos.
We don't need to hear that. Not when we're going away in a couple of days. I don't want anything to go wrong. I've been looking so forward to this trip. By golly, we need it, I say.
Oh, don't be ridiculous, sweetheart, says my husband, running his hand across his stubble. You do allow your imagination to get the better of you sometimes, Viola.
What does my star sign say? I hope it's a little bit more positive than yours is, emitting the words chaos and upheaval, and of course unexpected surprises. I don't need any of that.
What star sign are you? I'm not into that kind of thing, so I don't know. What is the 30th of August, then?
I'm Virgo. 30th of August is Virgo. We're supposed to be realistic, blunt, self-sufficient, witty and hard-working. Although we can be accused of being arrogant and critical. But the more people get to know us, the better they tend to like us. That's all I know.
You're not arrogant or critical, sweetheart. The reverse is true. But yes, you are realistic. You don't have your head in the clouds. Oh, here we are. Let's see what it says. Open your mind to the impossible, and the impossible will find you. Open your eyes to what you cannot see, and you might see it. For opportunities are open for you this week. And be open to making an unlikely, idiosyncratic friend who may just cross your path fortuitously.
I hardly think we're going to be making new friends. Not while we're on holiday staying at a remote beach house off the Oregon coast, far from everything. It doesn't exactly inspire itself to making friends. Besides, I've got lots of friends here in Albuquerque.
There you go, says my husband, laughing. None of this stuff is remotely true. Don't look so serious about everything, Viola.
I just don't want anything to go wrong on our holiday, that's all. I've been looking so forward to it. I've been so excited about it. I fancy the isolation, getting away from people, being on our own with the beach sand caressing our feet, the sunshine warming our shoulders, and the blue surf twinkling under the morning sun. It doesn't get better than that.
Why would you think anything could possibly go wrong? Asked my husband. That's rather a pessimistic outlook for someone as positive as you, is it not?
I sigh. You're right, James. I am being pessimistic. It's just we've had such a tough year, haven't we? I guess you could say nothing really went right this year. If I was to actually write an astrological prediction for the year, I would have written, tear this one out of your life. This will be a year of loss, a year of disappointment and heartbreak.
Don't let that cloud the holiday for you, says my husband. I'm sure we'll have a great time. I know we've had a rough year, but we're not alone in that. There are many people out there like us who had a tough year this year, much like ourselves, worse even. As King Solomon says in his writings, there's a season for everything, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to weep, a time to laugh, and a time to tear, and a time to mend. We just need to pick up the pieces of our lives and march on. You know what my father used to say to me when I was growing up? If you hit rock bottom, you cannot sink any further. So the only way is up. My mother was not an academic, like me or my father, but that woman had a sagacious, wise head on her shoulders, and she was always right. I think I see a lot of her in you, you know.
It had indeed been a tough year for me and my husband, the kind of year most people would wantonly remove from their calendar, if given the choice. In 1 year, me and my husband had lost several people close to us, including our teacup Yorkshire Terrier we had owned for 13 long years, that my husband fortuitously ran over in the driveway when he returned home one night. A beloved member of our family, lost so tragically and so needlessly. Even for my husband, who was normally stoic about most things, losing our furry boy under the wheel of his truck had been a bitter, hard pill to swallow.
I didn't see him. I was driving very slowly. Then I felt the bump, he explained, and I just knew I'd run over little Goofy.
If that wasn't bad enough, I lost my best friend to breast cancer. It had been the most bizarre case of cancer I'd ever seen. I was soon to learn that disease can behave differently in the bodies it chooses to inhabit. It would seem that was certainly the case for my best friend, who was so well, so healthy, so vibrant, with no signs of any problems that would make you conclude that she was actually seriously ill. She had no pain, no bizarre symptoms, apart from suffering from this insufferable exhaustion from time to time that would come on her in waves. I told her to visit her GP, get a full diagnosis, but my friend wouldn't listen to me. She avoided the doctor like the plague. My friend had used the internet to self-diagnose herself, something we're told we shouldn't do. She informed me that she had chronic fatigue syndrome, upon which there is no cure, so she was stuck with the condition. I took her at her word, but a week later she was found dead in her bed, having died overnight in her sleep, which I'm told is the best way to go, and I can't actually argue with that. To my amazement, her body after the post-mortem was discovered to be riddled with an aggressive form of breast cancer. Ironically, the coroner said she was one of the lucky ones, not having major symptoms experienced by most, which would involve chronic, debilitating pain. She had none of that. Even better, she didn't know she was dying. It would seem she had a lucky escape from the chaotic upheaval that often comes with a cancer diagnosis. She was spared of all that indignity, all that debilitating soul-destroying grief, as was her family. But it didn't make her loss any more easy. If that was not bad enough, a month later my husband lost his parents, who on a trip to Alaska were killed tragically in a plane crash, on one of those small planes when the good weather just suddenly turned and became tumultuously turbulent, and the plane plundered towards its watery grave. If there was any consolation to be seen in these unexpected deaths, in all cases the victims had been spared of any suffering, and so in the darkness there was a glimmer of light, in a manner of speaking. Let's just say it was only those left behind that had to pick up the pieces and make sense of it all. And for me, I couldn't do it. I'd lost my very best friend, and given how during my childhood friends were a rare treasure that I could not easily acquire, given the way my parents moved around so much, and we never stayed in one place long enough to make friends. So losing Tonya, the close friend I had acquired when I married James, was a cruel blow. It was hard for me not to take these unheralded deaths personally. It felt almost as if the universe was choosing to unleash its unmerciful wrath on me. It had taken me a long time to actually smile again. Me and my husband James decided we needed a break away from it all, away from people, from the frenzied, topsy-turvy disruptions of life. Suffice to say, after a lot of research, I found this perfect house online, situated on a remote ribbon of beach in Oregon. It seemed to me that this place was calling to my heart, as strange as that may sound. We hired a truck when we arrived in Oregon, and drove to the prepossessing beach house, a log home made from massive old-growth logs, imported all the way from Canada. It twinkled under the light of the afternoon sun, almost as if it was smiling down upon us, like a long-lost friend that we hadn't seen in quite a long time. The congenial house wore its heart on its sleeve, as it did not hide its warmth from us, or pretend to be something it was not. It was a square building with a grey slate roof, floor-to-ceiling windows that masterfully maximised the transfixing coastal views. The house itself was nestled on an undulating viridescent mountainous incline, rather like a matchbox on top of a green mountain. It was sumptuously carpeted with rich verdant grass. The rear of the property was fringed by magnanimous clusters of velvety Douglas firs and spruce trees. You could observe a long ribbon of golden beach sand stretching before us in a long vertical trajectory. Beyond the golden beach sand was the vast sprawling expanse of the aquamarine ocean, with its billowing ocean waves, tossing, bouncing, pouncing and bounding towards the shore, with an unbridled rambunctious enthusiasm that could not be tethered or tamed, while it gently rolled towards the sand, caressing it delicately with bubbles of white, ethereal foam. I could observe sculptural rocks trespassing, jutting impertinently through the aquamarine water, like the bumpy appendages of a large, powerful sea creature, rising majestically through the ocean waves. looking up into the vast canopy of the cobalt blue sky. Seagulls pirouetted and sailed above the clouds, floating with the wind, surfing the horizon, their wings outstretched, their ha-ha calls drifting above the sound of the crashing ocean waves. I felt for a moment as if I was locked up in paradise, caught up in a dreamy world where you are taken on a magic carpet in your mind during moments of soulful reflection and deep meditation.
"It's beautiful out here,
"Isn't it?" said my husband.
"Penny for your thoughts. For a moment there, you seemed so far away."
"I can't help it. I guess for a second I got caught up in the beauty, like the seagulls soaring up there in the sky. It really is magnificent out here, isn't it? And better still, there isn't a solitary soul in sight. We've got this place all to ourselves. It doesn't get better than this. And look over there. There's a helipad with a circle marked H for any helicopters." The inside of the house was well presented, with quartzite and hand-scraped acacia floors, with dramatic river rock fireplaces and very high ceilings, along with extensive brickwork that married into the stone and wood, creating an old-world traditional effect. The whole house had been perfectly decorated, with stunning sumptuous furnishings, soaking baths, and a very well-appointed kitchen, fitted with all the latest mod cons. We would be able to sink into the sea sand during the day, to embrace the incredible views, and to our cosy beds at night, between the finest Egyptian cotton sheets, upon which no expense had been spared. In the late afternoon, me and my husband walked along the beach, holding hands with our pants rolled up over our knees, as the cool ocean waves swept across our feet with a cold, refreshing blast of fizzing water. We sat down on the beach to watch the sunset over the horizon, mesmerised by the tangerine sky. It was in the early hours of the morning that my husband woke me up. I was groaning, as the inconvenience of being disturbed when I was so tired, and caught up in the throes of what seemed like a riveting dream. I groaned, "What is it, James? What's the matter?"
"I'm in great pain. It's excruciating. I can't describe it. I've got pain in my flank area, on the back here, under the rib cage. I feel as if I want to throw up and be really sick. I can't even seem to pee, and when I do, it stings like hell. I don't know what's going on here."
I watched as my husband paced up and down awkwardly, trying to find some comfort in his movements, but finding none. I could hear him trying to vomit, with wincing guttural noises that didn't cooperate with his desire to hurl up the contents of his stomach. I quickly did research online about his strange symptoms, and I discovered that he either had a urinary tract infection or a kidney stone. He was doubled up in pain, and despite his protests, I called for help. I couldn't sit back and watch my husband suffer such debilitating pain.
"Supposing it's nothing," he said. "I'll look like a complete imbecile."
"Supposing it's something, James. I've lost too many people this year. I'm not about to lose you as well. Let me tell you, pain is an indicator that something is wrong. Remember when I had that dreadful tooth pain? I had to have a root canal done. If I'd left that pain unattended, it would have become an abscess. Do you know, in the olden days, infections like that would actually kill you. People died from infections like that." The helicopter arrived on the helipad to escort my husband to hospital. He suddenly told the EMTs he felt a lot better.
"I don't know what's happened here, but I want to tell you that I'm feeling a lot better now. The pain seems to have just vanished. I'm feeling much more like myself. I don't think I need to go to hospital after all. It was excruciating for the last hour, but it's just disappeared." "Sir, I'm not happy with what you're telling me," says the EMT. "It sounds like you have a kidney stone. Maybe it passed through to the bladder, which is why your pain is gone. But you may have other stones in there. Some might not be able to pass so naturally. You need to go to hospital, have a routine scan, your urine tested, and blood work done, so we know exactly what's going on with you. You may need antibiotics for an infection, and painkillers, of course." "You think it's a kidney stone?" I asked the EMT. "I'm no expert, ma'am, but it sounds like it is. I won't be happy until your husband is fully checked out."
Isn't it funny? I said to my husband, who is now feeling as right as rain, his painful recall now a faint memory of the past. Remember your horoscope? It said a small thing could unravel your plans this week. I wonder if the small thing the horoscope was talking about was in fact a gallstone of all things.
Wow, said my husband, that is quite a coincidence. I'll give you that.
Suffice to say, my husband did have a kidney stone, which the doctor said had passed through to the bladder, so the pain had disappeared. But he'd have to pass that stone through the urine, and that could potentially be rather painful. The scan also showed my husband had a plethora of gallstones that needed to be removed in an operation at once. As these ones he would not be able to pass, they were too big. My husband persuaded me to go back to the beach house and enjoy myself.
I know it might be lonely for you, sweetheart, but I don't want you hanging around a boring old hospital. Go and have some fun for me, will you? I'll video chat to you in the evenings. I'll be back with you in a couple of days. You'll hardly notice that I'm gone.
So there I was, back at the beach house, all on my own, overlooking the glorious views of the Oregon coast. I was really sad my husband wasn't with me, but I wasn't worried about him, as the doctor assured me he'd be as right as rain. Needless to say, it would be a whole lot less fun without him around, but I was determined to thoroughly enjoy myself, and enjoy myself I most certainly did. In truth, I didn't feel alone at all. When I could hear the crashing ocean waves, the whisper of the wind wailing through the trees, and the caw-caw or ha-ha sounds of the seagulls, I felt as if I was in very good company, as the natural world hugged me effusively, like a beloved old friend. I kept abreast of all the developments at the hospital on my cell phone, and by all accounts my husband was doing rather well. One morning I decided to get up at the crack of dawn, before the sun actually rose over the peninsula. The water is very cold here at the Oregon coast all year round, so you'd need a wetsuit to embrace those waves, if you're brave enough, that is, as the temperature of the water, even in summer, barely gets above 58 degrees. But I didn't mind getting wet, up to my knees in the icy water. It would be invigorating, I thought. It was about 4:45 when I arose out of my bed. I'm not used to getting up this early, but I did on this occasion. The weather was pleasingly warm, as it was summer, and the temperatures during the day can sometimes get up to 80 degrees. It was dark in the house, but I switched on a couple of lights and made a flask of warm coffee and a ham and cheese sandwich. I put it in a shoulder bag, along with a towel, a book, some sunscreen and a torch. I thought it would be fun to walk on the beach in the early hours of the morning, even when it was dark, until I waited for the sun to rise, which would be at about 5:22. I closed the front door behind me, ambled over to the steps embedded in the mountainous hill that led down to the soft beach. It was really dark outside. For a brief second, I had slight reservations about whether going down to the beach at this time of the morning, when it was so dark, was actually a good idea. It felt a little intimidating, as I'd always had issues of being afraid of the dark when I was a young girl. Its residual bodeful influences had never quite escaped me. I told myself to get a grip. I was the only solitary soul on this beach, for goodness sake. It would be fun to watch the sun rise in 20 minutes, and being on the beach when it happened would make it all the more magical for me. I glide down the steps cautiously with my torchlight. The moonlight casts its soft, floaty, wispy shadows across the landscape. But many of the dense geographic features, including the tall, imposing, needled trees, are lost and shrouded by the dark veil of the twilight that conceals and overlays much under a dense blanket of secrecy. There is a soft, invigorating breeze blowing across the water. I can hear the soothing sounds of the waves crashing against the rocks. I find a place to sit down as I sink into the soft but cold beach sand like a comfortable beanbag. I drink my delicious warm coffee, my eyes beginning to adjust to the darkness. I can feel the arresting beauty of this place, taste the salt in the air, feel the caressing gentle touches of a cool breeze whispering in my ears, nudging my skin. All of a sudden, the tranquil silence is disturbed by this agonizing shriek. It sounds like a child crying out in pain. My natural instinct is to run. I'm a schoolteacher in Albuquerque, and so hearing a child scream grabs my attention faster than anything I know. So I'm instinctively dashing towards the sound, running over the beach sand, the light of my torch waving precariously all over the place. The sound was coming from the jagged outcrops of rocks that jutted out from the edge of the beach. I run towards the rocky outcrop and hear the whimpering sound of a child in pain. I can see a small figure hovering over the rocks. "Are you all right over there? Are you all right? I'm coming!" I cry out, dashing over to the indeterminate figure, throwing my arms around what I assume must be a child, although what they're doing here on a private beach like this at this time of the morning has not even entertained my thoughts, nor has it preoccupied my questioning mind for even a second. All that concerns me right now is a child is in distress and needs my help. I see the Delphic figure. He appears to have his foot caught between the crack of two rocks and is struggling to get it out. "Are you all right?" I ask. "What happened?" The child continues to whimper. And the light of my torch travels from the face to the foot. This is not a child. This is a young Bigfoot. I'm so astonished by what I'm seeing, befuddled by how human this Bigfoot child is. In truth, he's no different to any of the kids in my class at school, only he's covered in a great deal of hair, has overlong arms, and a very distinct pyramid-shaped head. The creature soothed by my presence, relieved by my company. The Bigfoot child points to his foot, stuck between the cracks of the rocks. How the hell did he get his foot in there, I wonder? The creature starts talking at me, explaining how it happened in a language I don't understand. But he seems delighted in sharing all the details of how his foot became ensnared by the two cracks in the rock. The way he's going on and on, the information he's unloading, sounds so riveting. I could actually write a book about it, if I knew the hell what he was trying to tell me. I lean over to touch the Bigfoot's foot. I try to pull it out of the crack, but it simply won't budge. When I try to pull it out, he whimpers and cries out in pain. All I can do is cradle him in my arms and stroke his long hair, telling him it'll be all right, but in truth, I don't know what the hell to do to help him. All of a sudden, I hear a whistle. The little Bigfoot's eyes light up. He whistles back, and then I hear feet bounding towards us. And in the light of my torch, I see a huge female Bigfoot standing only feet away from me. For a moment, she's standing very still, like a towering, lofty tree, looking at me with a bemused, rather bewildered expression on her face, as if I was the last person in the entire world she expected to see. And she's not quite certain how to react to me. I'm so in awe of this female Bigfoot. She's majestic, graceful, agile, easily 8 foot tall, with massive shoulders, a very slender but muscular build, and small breasts. The little Bigfoot is talking to his mother earnestly, telling her exactly what happened. She seems to ask him a few questions. Their language sounds like an ancient indigenous dialect, incorporating a plethora of clicks. Omashaki, Anna, Ankun Gonita, Abo, Alikron, Omele, Ano, Wishigalaba, Umokoli, Aminigo, Ibole, Uncle Molly, Omini, Amokofashokaba. The Bigfoot female races over to her son, bending down to examine the damage, and studying the crack and her child's foot rather curiously. She wiggles it around the crack for a while. And for a while then, with one huge thrustful jerk that happens so fast, she successfully pulls her child's foot out of the crack. And the Bigfoot child can't protest because it happens so quickly. He doesn't even scream out. And lo and behold, his foot has been removed from the crack. But I'm certain it's got to be damaged. How did it get out of that confinement? Me and the Bigfoot female are hovering over the foot to examine it closely. The little Bigfoot rises to his feet and attempts to walk on the foot that has been trapped, and his foot is perfectly fine. I'm ecstatic. I start clapping, and the Bigfoot female begins to clap as well. Our eyes meet, and the two of us have a meeting of minds, a moment when an unlikely friendship is born between us.
I notice she has the most exquisite, beautiful eyes that I've ever seen, that in the dark give off a yellow eye shine. The little Bigfoot begins to whoop with delight, realizing that his foot is absolutely fine. And to demonstrate this fact, he begins to run up and down the beach. Okay, the Bigfoot female points to the horizon and to the beach, and I know she's asking me to join her, to watch the sun rising over the peninsula. I feel so privileged, so blessed. In that moment, despite her great gargantuan size, I wonder how anyone in the entire world could ever be terrified of such an intelligent, majestic creature, who is more human than many people I actually know. The creature has a heart on her, as large as the ocean. We sit there in silence. I'm seated between the Bigfoot child and the Bigfoot mother, like a single inconspicuous book between two very sizable bookends, as we stare up in awe at the enchanting sunrise. At first the sun, like an obsequious, reluctant child, being woken up by its mother, struggles to make much of an impression, but slowly and surely it emerges from the dark shadows, as it peeks curiously through the clouds, and the wavering blue light scatters, creating delightful prisms of tangerine orange to burst across the sky in a golden glow that reflects and twinkles brightly on the water. It's beautiful, I say, and so are you and your son. It's such a pleasure to have met you. The Bigfoot studies me with her twinkling bright eyes and says something I don't understand, but I believe she's saying, "Thank you, and so are you beautiful, and so was it a pleasure to meet you as well." Well, those were the impression her words conveyed to me. I just wish my husband would believe you were real. I think, as she looks at me, nods her head, and gracefully glides away. For a brief moment, I saw a twinkle in her eye, as if she'd read my very thoughts. Of course, when I told my husband about my outlandish encounter with the idiosyncratic Bigfoot duo, and about the little Bigfoot getting caught up in the rocks, he looked at me nonplussed, as if he thought I'd been smoking pot while he was away in hospital, or drinking way too much wine, and I was seeing things that weren't actually really there. You try telling a hardened cynic that Bigfoot is real, and he'll look at you as if you've lost leave of your senses. "Are you sure you're all right, sweetheart?" he asked me with concern. "I think you look a little peaky. You didn't spend too much time in the sun, did you, when I was in hospital?" I feel grievously annoyed. There's nothing worse when someone won't believe you when you tell them something. Why won't you listen, James? You said yourself I'm a realistic person. Why would I make any of this stuff up? I promise you it's absolutely true, I told him. Even my horoscope mentions something about making new friends and to be open to opportunities. And it was absolutely right, although I didn't expect my friend to be of the hairy kind. And it was right about the small thing unravelling your plans as well. A gallstone disrupted a few days of your holiday. You have to admit, both accounts are true. My husband rolls his eyes. "You know what I think about that, sweetheart? I think it's just a very convenient coincidence. Yes, it does seem that my little gallstone held up the holiday. But the fact that the astrological sign got it accurate doesn't mean a thing. It's what you call coincidence. Lucky chance." My husband was now fighting fit, but he had been in hospital and had over 13 gallstones removed. He was as right as rain, back to his normal self. The man whose life was dictated by common sense, dappled by sound reasoning, that always found a reasonable explanation for everything, and was not buying my incredulous story, not even for a single moment. "You know what I think? I'm not trying to be unkind here, but I think you had a very lucid, vivid dream. And it was so vivid you thought it was real. So you think what happened was true. That can happen, you know. But surely you can't expect me to believe such a doubtful, implausible story." I was thoroughly enjoying the rest of my holiday with my husband, but had seen no sight or sound of the Bigfoot. But one afternoon, as we were walking along the beach, the female Bigfoot crosses our path, nods at me, and then darts across the beach sand. I know she did that for me,
to show my husband that not everything is so black and white. I'll never forget my husband's expression. Oh, I wish I could literally keep it forever locked in the memory of my mind. He rubbed his eyes, looked at me and said,
"Did I see what I thought I just saw?"
I nodded.
"I think I owe you an apology."
It was the Bigfoot female, I tell him, the one I met. I think she deliberately showed herself to you, as she knew from what I told her in my mind that you wouldn't believe my story.
My word! Who would have ever thought a creature like that could really exist? I'm completely floored. I do apologize, my darling. I can't believe it. I've had a real awakening today.
All these years later, I think of my incredulous encounter with those cryptic Bigfoots with a wistful nostalgia. And even though my husband is still resolutely set in his ways, he has to admit that not everything is as black and white as he first believed. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.